Hello again, friends. Back again for the Friday evening. Do you remember where we left off last week? My mother went along to Bridie to fetch the accordion, which she borrowed for her husband to do busking down the West End, in the hope that they could earn some money to buy some food for the kids. And I'll continue with it now. Bridie was hesitating. Look, Gwyneth, I'm sorry, but the accordion's not here. Oh, don't worry, Bridie, I said, I'll come back later. That's the problem, Gwyneth. I don't know how to tell you. It's not broken, is it? No, I don't know. Oh, I do wish that Paddy was here to tell you. Look, Bridie, I told her, whatever the reason, we can sort it out. Then Bunny can go out and busk this weekend. Bridie spoke quickly now. Look, I may as well. She was close to tears. We ran out of money, so Paddy took it to the pawn shop. Before she could go on, I interrupted her. Don't worry. Just tell me which pawn shop and I'll go and get it. As I was trying to tell you, Gwyneth, he did pawn it, but couldn't afford to get it out, and the time ran out. What am I going to tell Bunny? There's me with another baby on the way, and we'll soon have to give up work. That accordion has been our lifesaver when money's been short. Bridie, trying to be hopeful, said, maybe you should go to the shop and see if it's still there. I put you back in your pram and I hurried to the shop. Sorry, we have a shortage of accordions. That one sold quickly. Back in our little flat, I gave Bunny the bad news. He stood thoughtful for a while. Well, Gwyneth, Paddy must have been desperate. He's a good man and would never do anyone down. I think I'll go to Gino's in the morning. Maybe he can find me a bit more sign writing. June, your dad never failed to reinvent himself when his back was to the wall. The next weekend I watched him standing back from the newly painted trike. He whistled happily as he walked over to collect another. Now we come to my evacuation. My brother Antonio, Tony, was born 14 months after me. Gwyneth was able to find work when me and Tony were toddlers by putting us in a day nursery. My parents were then able to rent a bigger flat and life settled down. That was until the rumblings of a possible war with Germany were on the horizon. And then, on September the 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. And on the 3rd of September, England and France declared war on Germany. I was too young to know what this meant, but strange things were happening. My mother put up black blinds to cover the windows. My dad dug a big hole in the garden and put a roof on it. He told me that it was called a shelter. He put a bed down there and said we could sleep there sometimes. Me and my brother thought it was fun. When we were taken for walks, we saw great big balloons as big as houses in fields. They were too big to play with. Our father told us they were called barrage balloons for the war. Sometimes there were some very loud noises in the streets. He told us they were called sirens, and if we heard them, we had to go and sleep in the shelter. One day out shopping with my mother, the sirens warned of German bombers approaching, and she ran with us to an underground station to shelter with other people. I remember the music down there. Soon after, our parents told us that they were taking us on a train. We'd never been on a train before and were very excited. It was a long way away, and they told us that we would see our grandfather. We were shy when we saw him waiting at the station. We didn't know him. Back in his cottage, Sarah, the lady he lived with, put plates of dinner on the table, and we played a little while before being put to bed together. About 2 days later, my parents began packing their bags, but left our clothes in the bedroom. They told us, you will live now with your grandfather and Sarah because of the war. We were too young to understand about the war. Weeping, we stood at the cottage door as we waved goodbye to our parents, who hugged and kissed us, saying, will come back to see you at Christmas. I thought I saw my father wipe away his tears. And then the first of many homes. I was 4-year-old and my brother 3, too young to understand what the war was, and that we had to adapt to a new life in a Welsh cottage far away from the security of life with our parents in London. It felt as though we'd been given away, but we were too young to understand why. Neither did we know that my mother, Gwyneth, thought that we would be safe in this small village, Pontlottin, set in a Welsh valley, safe from the Germans' bombs. Back inside the cottage, Sarah sat us down for tea. We were just getting used to her and my grandfather, who until then had been strangers to us. How different life was with these strangers. I remember playing on the hearth in front of a coal fire with Tony, and our breakfast of lumps of bread in a dish of warm milk with sugar. It was Sarah who taught me to say my prayers at night, kneeling at the side of our bed. There was a pigsty in the garden outside. Where are the pigs? I asked Sarah. Oh, they've all been killed now. We'll have some for dinner tonight. We made friends with the children in the other cottages and played in the empty pigsty when it was raining. And when the sun came out, ran up and down the nearby mountains. We didn't know until we were older that these were slag heaps, the waste from the village coal mines now covered in grass. Across the road from Sarah's home, we paddled in a shallow river, the Rumley, and as children lived in the moment, despite the turmoil in our lives created by the war. 3 months is a long time for young children to be separated from their parents. My parents' arrival just before Christmas apparently left Tony and me unmoved. Telling me years later, my mother said, "We walked into the cottage and you were playing on the hearth. You looked up at us as though we were strangers and went on playing." I can only imagine how distraught they were at this, knowing that they too would have to leave us again after Christmas. It was Easter 1940, when there was a national realisation that the earliest threat by Hitler that his air force would destroy London hadn't happened. In fact, there was little evidence that a war had begun, despite the Germans' conviction that it would all be over in a year. My parents decided, like many, that it was turning out to be a non-war and that they should take us back to our London home. I had started at the Pontlottin School. I would now go to school back in London. I was happy that at last I could be with my parents once more, though not knowing that this would prove to be a respite from the war. September 7th, 1940 was the beginning of the Blitz. 57 nights of the German planes' non-stop bombing of London, which would continue until May 1941. One night, with no warning, the heavy drone overhead planes and explosions burst into the night. My parents wrapped us in blankets and ran down the garden to the shelter my father had built when preparing for the war. We lay on the beds he put underground, putting our fingers in our ears as we listened to the deafening explosions all around us. I was terrified as the bombs raining down from the German bombers lit up the sky. The noises of that night are imprinted on my mind. As day was breaking, my father said, "I'm going out to see if our house has been damaged." And I cried, saying, "Don't go, Daddy, you'll be killed." "I'll be all right," he told me. "I'm wearing my tin hat." Years later, he told me that while the windows in the house were broken and the door blown out, the house itself was safe to live in, but that the street at the bottom of our garden and all its houses had been blown up. When it became clear that the Blitz was going to continue night after night, my parents took us on the train once again to live in Wales. They returned to London, my father to work in a bomb damage team and my mother to work in a factory. I went back to local school in Wales and waited until we would become a family again. I hope you enjoyed that. Next week, I shall be telling you about a chapter entitled Stonehouse, which is where I went to live next, just for a few months when I had absolute stability. Thank you for listening.